The episode opens with Takumi's disoriented spirit, unsure of his location. A radiant glow envelopes him as Nolan, a sorceress possessing the power to transport individuals across realms, addresses him. She reveals that he was inadvertently summoned to Mildgard along with a handful of others. Apparently, the ritual, meant to bring forth different individuals, unintentionally swept him along in the process. When Takumi struggles to grasp her explanation, she clarifies that she aimed to randomly summon people from various worlds, and he was caught in the crossfire. Nolan further explains that the incantation she employed is highly precarious because the fundamental laws governing Mildgard differ significantly from those of Earth, posing a risk to Mildgard's very existence. Takumi inquires about the others who were summoned, but Nolan informs him they are elsewhere. The true objective of the spell was to securely transport these individuals to the Holy Empire of Sidonia. Recognizing his involvement as a mere blunder, Takumi requests to be returned. Nolan becomes agitated, admitting her inability to reverse the spell. Moreover, he no longer possesses a physical form to return to. Distressed and bewildered, Takumi wonders what will become of him. Nolan explains that he must embrace a new existence as an inhabitant of Mildgard. He proposes going to Sidonia, but Nolan firmly rejects the idea, describing Sidonia as a place rife with turmoil, unsuitable for someone mistakenly summoned. Overwhelmed with guilt, she resolves to send him to a different land, offering her magical aid as a form of recompense. This realm, she describes, is reminiscent of fantasy worlds found in video games, novels, and animated series. When Takumi asks if it contains monsters and dragons, she confirms that it boasts a plethora of fantastical creatures. After reviewing Takumi's past life as an office clerk, a profession non-existent in Mildgard, Nolan decides to transform him into a hero and warrior. She bestows upon him a multitude of abilities, including swordsmanship, magic, and knightly prowess. She explains that by utilizing these skills in action, he can acquire a profession, and if he desires a crafting vocation, she will grant him a specialized spell along with healing magic for self-preservation. Concluding their exchange, she dispatches him to the continent of Asgard. Later, Takumi lies unconscious on the Asgardian continent. Upon awakening and gazing at his reflection in a nearby lake, he is astonished by his enhanced appearance. He resolves to leave his past behind. Sitting down to eat, he discovers provisions and a small sum of money. Examining his skill menu, he resolves to experiment with his newfound abilities. He practices water magic, air-cutting magic, and stone ball magic, filled with exhilaration at the wondrous nature of this world. Venturing into the forest in search of a nearby settlement, he stumbles upon a piece of exceptional wood, ideal for crafting wizard staffs, magical tools, and spear shafts. Excited by the possibilities, he utilizes his blacksmithing skill to fashion a sturdy spear. He marvels at the quality of the wood and wonders about the potential of the local flora. He begins gathering an abundance of plants, quickly filling his small bag. Recalling his toolbox, he transfers his collection into the larger container. Suddenly, a girl's scream pierces the air. She rushes towards him, seeking refuge behind him. A gigantic rabbit appears, and the girl pleads with Takumi to protect her from its potentially lethal jaws. Takumi is terrified. In this world, rabbits are carnivorous. The rabbit lunges at them, and Takumi musters his strength, wielding his spear to strike the creature down. This feat earns him the warrior skill. The girl, Molly, expresses her gratitude for his intervention. He asks her origin, and she reveals she hails from Board Village. She had been collecting medicinal herbs and lost her way. Takumi offers to escort her home. He starts to open his toolbox to store the rabbit carcass but hesitates, realizing he prefers not to reveal its contents to Molly. The scene shifts to the Holy Empire of Sidonia, where three individuals find themselves within a palace, completely disoriented. They, too, are from another world. Empress Elizabeth approaches, expressing profound appreciation for their willingness to answer the summons. One of them inquires about their location, and she explains that they are in a completely different realm. They were brought here to employ their powers as heroes and save this world. Confused by her pronouncements, they listen as she promises a more detailed explanation later. She introduces herself as Elizabeth, the first empress of the Holy Empire of Sidonia. Meanwhile, Takumi arrives at Molly's home, where her family expresses their sincere thanks for his rescue of their daughter. They introduce themselves. Molly's father, Bunga, is a hunter, and her mother, Martha, is his wife. Takumi inquires about the possibility of staying in the village temporarily, and Bunga readily agrees, mentioning the abundance of medicinal ingredients and nearby raw materials. He describes the area as a craftsman's paradise. Just then, Bubun arrives, introduced by Bunga as a blacksmith knowledgeable in mining. Takumi is welcome to stay as long as he needs. Grateful for their hospitality, he learns that the village lacks an inn, so they offer to construct a small dwelling for him. Bunga apologizes for the modest accommodations, but assures him it's the best they can offer. He proposes they commence work together, starting with leveling the ground. Takumi begins using his magic to build his house, but quickly becomes fatigued, having depleted most of his magical energy. Banga approaches, suggesting they proceed to the next phase. Overjoyed, Takumi reflects on the beginning of his new life. Utilizing his woodworking, blacksmithing, and carpentry skills, he constructs some furniture, which he can later modify. This, he realizes, is the life he's always yearned for. He possesses iron, silver, and copper ore mined with bourbon, including mana-infused magical iron. He plans to transform it into ingots, a process normally requiring a large furnace, but this is a world of fantasy. It's time to experiment with alchemy. Remembering the 5 alchemic techniques, decomposition, extraction, grinding, creation, and reassembly, he extracts iron ore and channels earth magic through it, successfully producing an iron ingot. He's confident in his abilities and eager to refine his technique, envisioning the countless objects he can create with iron and copper. Molly discovers Takumi collapsed on the ground, surrounded by the villagers. He explains that his overzealous use of magic led to his unconsciousness. Martha gently chides him for overexerting himself. After receiving a healing potion from Bunga, Takumi recounts his successful extraction of iron, silver, copper, magical iron, and smaller quantities of gold, lead, tungsten, and tin. He crafted kitchen tools and other items, significantly increasing his alchemy level. Later, Takumi hones his weapon crafting skills. He admires his finest creation to date, noting that once he finishes the sheath, it will be complete. He approaches Bunga and inquires about the materials he requested. Bunga confirms their delivery, describing them as standard components. Takumi expresses his intention to try his hand at potion making using the medicinal herbs he's collected. Bunga encourages him, offering to purchase some of his stock once it's ready. Takumi begins melting crushed hellcock herbs with water. The changing color of the mixture reminds him of childhood experiments. He notes the unusual hue and senses mana within the concoction, speculating that it might be due to preparing the water with water magic. He expresses a desire to learn more potion recipes. Later, Takumi consumes some herbs in the forest, but becomes nauseated and purges his stomach. He acknowledges the difficulty of this method for building resistance and enhancing state magic skills, but recognizes its effectiveness. Thanks to this arduous process, he can now utilize purification magic. A monster suddenly appears, and Takumi is filled with fear. The monster attacks, but its assault is ineffective against Takumi's magic. He notices a venomous spider behind him, injured by the monster. Alarmed that his magic seems ineffective against the larger creature, he redoubles his efforts, finally vanquishing the monster. He then turns his attention to the injured spider, healing its wounds. To his surprise, the spider desires to be tamed. Astonished, Takumi names it Queen Evie, a name that delights the spider. Later, the villagers marvel at Takumi's defeat of the monstrous wild boar, expressing apprehension towards the tamed spider. Bunga explains that insect monsters are notoriously untamable. They are thrilled and decide to hold a feast with the boar meat. Bunga notes that the monster's remains can be used to craft leather armor, and its tusks and leftover hide can be sold in Bolton City. One of Bunga's friends remarks on how Takumi has brightened the village, despite not being the type to remain in such a small community indefinitely. The scene transitions to Lona, who expresses happiness for Takumi. Her companion reminds her that she not only provided him with a special body, but also sent him a year into the past, before the Holy Empire of Sidonia conducted their summoning ritual. One morning, Takumi awoke to find himself bound in bed, instantly recognizing Maple as the culprit. While she offered her apologies, she explained to Takumi that his recent busyness had left her feeling exceptionally lonely, so she was merely seeking his attention. It then dawned on Takumi that his dedication to work had severely limited the time he spent with Maple. He decided to put his work aside for the day, focusing on playing with Maple instead, which delighted her. At that moment, Martha entered, carrying a lunch for Takumi. She noticed the peculiar scene between Takumi and Maple, but was quickly assured by Takumi that everything was not as it seemed. Martha accepted his explanation. However, she was struck by the high quality of the silk that Maple had produced, and began scheming to extract as much silk from her as possible. Later that day, Martha had successfully fashioned a shirt from spider silk, captivating all the women in the village with its luxurious texture. Takumi was surprised that spider silk was in such demand, leading the women to explain it was a luxury item typically only available to the nobility. When Martha asked if Maple could spin more fabric, Maple started producing it, but since it was a lengthy process, Playing with Takumi was no longer an option. Takumi was somewhat disappointed, as he had been looking forward to spending time with Maple, but considering his own duties, he was not particularly bothered. It had been almost a month since Takumi's arrival in the village, and he intended to travel to the city to further his studies in alchemy. However, saying goodbye to all the villagers he had grown close to was proving difficult. Takumi visited Boron at the forge to continue his blacksmithing practice. Before long, they had finished crafting a chest plate, perfectly fitted for Takumi, as well as steel-toed boots. Boron mentioned that the boots could be useful if he ever had the need to kick something, but Takumi had no intention of fighting. He only desired to become an alchemist. Suddenly, Bangma appeared, pleased to see Takumi's armor completed, although saddened to see him leave soon. He acknowledged that Takumi could not remain there permanently if he wished to expand his business. Going to the city was the most logical step for him to sell more of his creations and obtain a steady supply of resources. A trader from Bolton was scheduled to arrive in a few days, so Bangma arranged for Takumi to hitch a ride back to Bolton with him. They were all sad to see him go, but they accepted it as necessary and instructed Takumi to begin preparing his belongings. Takumi thanked them for their support and started heading back towards his house to pack. On his way, he encountered Martha with a bucket of meat. He inquired what she was doing, and Martha explained that she was about to discard the offal from a horned rabbit. Bang Kad apparently told her that the innards were the tastiest part of the rabbit, but they required thorough processing to eliminate any diseases or parasites. The village did not have the required equipment, and she had to throw out the meat to prevent illness. But Takumi proposed that was unnecessary. He could simply purify the meat. He knelt down and employed his purification magic, making the meat in the bucket safe for consumption. Martha, while grateful, was equally astounded at Takumi's capacity to use light magic. She cautioned him not to disclose his abilities upon leaving the village, since very few individuals possessed such powers. Should his abilities become known, he would attract substantial and unwanted attention. Takumi heeded her warning, promising to be cautious, but he decided that while he remained in the village, he would utilize his magic to improve their quality of life. He then used earth magic to construct a brick wall for the village's security and convenience and added features such as a water pump and some other amenities. The village appeared brand new by the time he finished, and upon the arrival of the merchant, he scarcely recognized it. Bang came out to greet Papek, and after concluding a trade agreement, Takumi approached so they could leave. Papek, having already heard much about Takumi from Bang, introduced himself. Everyone asked if Takumi was prepared to leave, and he confirmed he hadn't forgotten anything, but he wished to give them one last thing. He took out a potion from his pack and presented it to Bangma. He had previously placed around 100 of these bottles at Bangma's house. In case of a disaster, he wanted Bangma to use these to heal any injuries. Papek was left speechless after seeing Takumi's potion and requested a closer inspection. It was evidently a high-grade potion, even though Takumi did not seem to realize its value. Soon, the rest of the villagers arrived to say farewell to Takumi. Papek stated he would wait for them to complete their goodbyes. Molly bid farewell to Maple, who was sleeping within Takumi's bag, and Martha presented Takumi with an outfit crafted by her and the other ladies from Maple Silk. Takumi conveyed his gratitude for such a considerate gift, thanking everyone again for being so kind to him despite their short acquaintance. He then boarded the carriage, and the villagers gave him a heartfelt send-off, assuring him he was always welcome to return. As Papek and Takumi headed toward Bolton, Papek commented on the deep affection the villagers held for him. The others in the carriage could tell that Takumi was practically family to them, and such a goodbye was touching. Also traveling to Bolton were his guards. The blonde one introduced himself as Heath, the redhead was Rail, and the more reserved one was named Booger. They were all members of a C-rank party called Lion Fong and acted as Papek's security detail, although the region was peaceful enough that they didn't often have much to do. Rail noticed Takumi tightly clutching his bag and asked if there was something valuable inside. Takumi responded, saying his pet killer spider was resting inside. The group was astonished that Takumi had managed to tame a killer spider. Rail then asked to see it, but he was being rather creepy, so Maple ended up headbutting him in the face. Takumi immediately began profusely apologizing for Maple's actions. However, the others reassured him that there was no need to apologize, since Rail deserved it. Heath even said that he wouldn't be surprised if Maple now feared humans because of Rail. However, that didn't seem to be the case, as she appeared to have taken a liking to Booger. While they all doted on Maple, Papek called Takumi to the front to discuss the potion he'd seen earlier. He asked if he had more available, as he was keen to buy some. Takumi was agreeable to selling potions, but suddenly the horse stopped. There appeared to be trouble on the road. A group of goblins was surrounding the carriage, preparing for an attack. But the group seemed pleased. It meant they would get to actually do something. They told Takumi and Papek to relax and let them handle everything. As they stepped outside, there were about 20 goblins. Confident in their abilities, they engaged in battle. Rail downed a few with his bow while Booger and Heath attacked the others with a mace and axe. It didn't take long for them to defeat all the goblins. After which, they began dissecting the bodies to gather the magic stones. From what Maple had observed, she found Booger to her liking. She disliked Rail, and she felt indifferent about Heath. Soon after, they were all back in the carriage, and the journey continued for the following 3 days, ending with their arrival in Bolton. Once they arrived at the city, the Lion Fong members went to the Adventurers Guild to report their success. Takumi went with them, since he needed to register with the guild to stay in the city. He would have preferred the Alchemist Guild, but since there wasn't one, he had to register as an adventurer instead. The receptionist, Hans, told Takumi that he could use the Adventurer Guild card for identification, and it would remain valid if he just completed a simple quest once a month. Takumi registered as an adventurer and registered Maple as his pet. After finishing all the registrations, Takumi went to Papek's trading company to make a deal for his potions. He had approximately 103 potions, all of extremely high quality. Papek offered to pay a stamina potion and 50 silver coins for each basic potion. Takumi calculated quickly in his head and figured he would make over 7 million yen from this deal. He thought that amount was excessive, but Papek told him that he could have earned more if he already had a reputation as a producer. Then, since Takumi wanted to start as a producer in the city, Papek recommended he look for a house with an attached workshop, but Takumi hadn't even considered where he would be living. Papek then called his assistant, Thomas, to show Takumi a good property with affordable rent. When Takumi saw the house, it appeared more like a mansion, which he did not think he could afford. Thomas assured him that the mansion was affordable and there were no ghosts, so there was no need to worry about that. When Takumi spotted the workshop that was connected to the house, he started considering buying it. It would be quite convenient for his work, and he could afford it with the money from selling his potions to Papek. After some deliberation, he decided to purchase the mansion, so he told Thomas he would take it. Thomas was happy to hear this, and said he would get started on the paperwork immediately so Takumi could move in by the next day. While they were walking through the streets of the city, Takumi detected a foul odor. Thomas realized that the smell was bothering Takumi and explained that the stench was coming from the sewers. Wealthy people had magical purifiers to clean their sewage, but the main city sewers had no such system. Magical purifiers were extremely rare since they were only found in ancient ruins and dungeons, and were thus too expensive to use on the city sewers. Some priests were hired periodically to clean the sewers manually, but for the most part, they remained filthy. The next day, Takumi and Maple moved into their new house. The first thing Takumi wanted to do was tackle the sewer issue. He obtained some quartz and clay from Papek's company, and after using magic to shape it, he used fire magic combined with space-time magic to quickly bake it. After working on that for a while, Takumi had completely depleted his mana. He needed to drink several mana potions, but he did manage to complete his creation, a modern toilet. Just then, he heard Papek yelling from the living room. He went to see what was wrong and found Papek wrapped head to toe in maple silk. Takumi asked Maple why she did this, but she thought Papek would find it fun. The comforting feel of her silk did make Papek fall asleep, but it was still not right, so Takumi apologized for Maple's actions. Papek said that everything was all right, but the sudden squishing had scared him a little, and so he needed to use Takumi's restroom. However, as soon as he went inside, he came back out and asked what the strange contraption was. Takumi showed him that it was a toilet, which would be connected to a magical purifier and would clean itself after usage. After you do your business, the toilet uses purification magic to convert your waste into harmless materials that could be flushed away. Papek understood, but the only way someone could possibly have made such a thing was if they possessed light magic. Takumi knew that he may have made a mistake, as Martha had warned him against showing off that ability, so he asked Papek to please keep it a secret. Papek understood why Takumi wished to keep his abilities a secret, and he promised not to tell anyone. He also said that he absolutely needed some of these toilets and asked Takumi to make 100 for him. Takumi was hesitant to agree, since making even a single toilet was quite demanding. But because Papek was insistent, Takumi agreed, as long as Papek could provide all the raw materials. Papek was very happy about that, but he couldn't expect Takumi to make all those toilets alone, so he suggested that Takumi should create a slave contract. Takumi was taken aback, as he would never want to own a slave. But Papek noted that if Takumi was attempting to conceal his abilities, acquiring a slave would be most beneficial, as the slave would be bound by secrecy. Having aptitude for light magic was a big deal, since it meant the individual was chosen by a god, so the Church of Divine Light would likely pursue Takumi, forcing him to work for them. They made a huge profit monopolizing purification magic, and Paypak did not think they would be happy about normal people having cheap purifiers thanks to Takumi's toilets. He had a plan for dealing with the church, so Takumi didn't need to worry just yet. The most important thing was preventing them from discovering his light magic, and getting a slave was the best way of achieving that. But Takumi was strictly opposed to slavery, so he said he would simply do all the work himself. At that moment, his guild card started glowing, and Takumi saw a message saying that he needed to complete a verification quest to maintain his status as an adventurer. So, he would not have time to make the toilets by himself after all. He caved in and agreed to buy a slave. Paypak took Takumi to the Mulan Trading Company, as they were known to be the most ethical slave traders. Paypak went to speak with the owner in order to get Takumi a good deal. In the meantime, Takumi went into the garden because it looked nice. He found a beautiful elf girl sitting on the terrace. As soon as she saw Takumi, she told him to leave.